Okay, so hello and welcome back to another Unity tutorial. In this one I'm going to be showing you how to create a key binding system using scriptable objects and Unity's inbuilt input system, but we're going to be extending that. Writing extensions to the actual Unity API stuff is, completely fine. There might be something which has practically all of the functionality you want, but there might be a slight tweak you want to it. So for example, the input system obviously works. We can do get key down, get key up, all that. But the problem is the actual key bindings. The only way to change them by default is before you open the game. When you've built the game and you press play, there's the window that pops up that asks you, change key bindings. But some people don't want that. They might want to get rid of that window and just have it being changed in the game, so that you can tweak the key bindings during gameplay by going to your menu. And also doing it via scriptable objects is just a good way of showing the use of scriptable objects and how multiple things can reference it just by you dragging it in. You don't have to do awkward getting and setting and stuff like that. Obviously this isn't the only way to do it, but when I first tried making a key binding system, I couldn't find many tutorials on YouTube. There are a few, but only a few, and most of them didn't work for me anyway. So I decided to make my own way using searchable objects, and obviously that doesn't mean that no one else has done it this way before, but I think it's a pretty good way. We'll see. So I want to start off by saying thanks to the Patreons, donators on Patreon. Thanks Paul Robinson, Phil Bourne for your $5 donations. If anyone else wants to help support me, then the link is in the description. But apart from that, let's get into it. So currently we have an empty scene. As I said, you can add it to any project at any stage. So just if you want to follow along with this, you could try it in a test server, a test project, or you can just put it right in. There's really no setup that is necessary. It's quite easy to do. You just need to have in your game manager somewhere the script, the object that doesn't get destroyed, that persists through scenes. You'll want to add a script called what should we call it? Should we call it Keybinding? I've already got Visual Studio open, so I'd have to load it. That's good. So let's call it add component. We'll call it input manager. New script. So this is the script we're going to refer to whenever we want to handle input, custom input, via the scriptable object. So inside the input manager, let's zoom in. So the input manager is going to be a singleton. There's only going to be one of it, so we can reference it easier, and we only want one of it anyway. You don't want to have two or any more. So we'll have a public static input manager called instance, and that's the standard for writing a singleton. And we need an awake method to set it, assuming that it isn't already set. So basically, what have I done wrong here? That's right. Yeah. So we need to basically say when we start, we're going to say, well, if the instance is null, then we can say the instance is this script here. This is checking basically whether the instance already exists. So for example, if we accidentally had the script twice and one of the other scripts sets itself as the instance, and then the other one runs the code, it won't set it as itself because it already exists. And then so yeah, we'll do an else saying else if the instance does not equal this. So we already know it's not this is saying if it is null. So if it's not null and it's not this, then we can just destroy it. It's lost connection. One sec. Let's just type it out anyway. So destroy this, and then we can write don't destroy unload. Now if we're in a single scene, this isn't going to make any difference, but if we ever go to another scene, this thing won't be destroyed. So yeah, let me just go back to Unity, give it a second. Let's close this. I might have to reopen Visual Studio because for some reason it doesn't want to work. But anyway, so yeah, we're going to have the main object which handles input. which we call functions on through the static class. There we go. It's working now. And then in here we're going to write functions for the checking. So yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a function for our own. What should we say? We can say public key code, because we might want to find out what key we need to press to do a particular thing. So let's say you have a UI pop up on the screen and it says, you know, press bloody blah to do this. This is how you can get what it is, because you could hard code it, but the problem is if they've changed their key bindings, you want it to update. So you could say get key for action, and I'll explain that in a second. Return keycode.none. So that's just so it lets us compile it. Then we're gonna add code here. You know, find key code. Yeah, that we'll come back to that. We're gonna have a function public bool get key down. So if you remember correctly, there's a input dot get key down, but we're gonna be using that, but with our own checker. So if we say this is just gonna return false, and then we're gonna check for key, or yeah, then we have to write, let's make a, so we've got get key down, and we can write get key. We'll just go with that maybe for this video, so you can always decide more. We can do get key up as well if you want. Get key up. So now, what do we need? Well, we need to write our own enum for actions, and by that I mean like actions that the player can do, things that have key bindings. So obviously when you're in a game, you go into your settings menu and you'll say jump is whatever key. So we need to store key binding actions. Now this script is going to be an enum, so I've covered enums before. They're basically just lists of states that it can be in. So we say public enum key binding actions, and then we can just fill in what do we want. Well, what kind of key binds do we want? We'll have a jump button, we'll have an interact button, a pause button, inventory button. I don't know. Let's go with that. So we just have this list of different things you can have key bindings for. You know, maybe crouch. I don't know. Whatever else you have. So what we can say is back in the input manager, when we do this key, we actually want to take in an action. So if we say get key for action, if we pass in key bindings, key binding actions, key binding action. So whenever we call this, we'll pass in an action, which is just the thing we want to check for. And what it's going to do is it's going to find which key code it's assigned to. So like if we passed in jump, it's going to return whatever the jump key is, if you get what I mean. So now what we want to do is we want to create our own scriptable object, which is what I said this was kind of about. So if we create a C# script called Keybindings, the benefit to making this a scriptable object is that we can easily swap it out with other key bindings. So if you had a computer or a game on a computer with multiple different presets, maybe different people have different key bindings, it's very easy to do. So in here, in the input manager, we want to have a reference to the key bindings. Like we want, key bindings called key bindings. So yeah, we're gonna store that, and we can reference it down here. But now let's write the code for a key bindings scriptable object. So it's going to be a scriptable object. So we can create it. It's create asset menu. File name, we'll call it Keybindings, and the menu name, we'll call it Keybindings. Why not? And then what do we want in here? Well, we're gonna have a list, and the list is gonna be a list of two things. Now we could use a dictionary, but the problem is dictionaries you can't serialize to be editable in the inspector, but you can with your own class. So if we write our own class inside here, public class keybinding check, like so, and we say system.serializable. That means that when we have like a list of this class, we can actually see it and use it. So what do we want this class to store? We want to store a key code, so an actual button on the keyboard, and a key binding action, which is, you know, like jump or crouch or whatever. So if we say public key binding action, like so, and a public key code. So this is like saying every action has its own key code, and then down here we can have a public array, so key binding check array, called key binding checks. Why not? And that's all the code we need on this scriptable object. Because back in the input manager, we can now well, let's go back here, for example. Let's create our object just to show you. So if we go create key bindings, boom, we have a list, and we can say list of size 5 or whatever, and we've got jump, crouch, interact, pause, inventory. So we can say now, if we go through this list, we can say, all right, so jump is bound to space, so space right at the top. We can say crouch is bound to control, so I personally don't know where control is on here. I mean, it doesn't matter. Let's just say crouch is shift. Because that's shift and control aren't actually on here, but they are, but they don't seem to be called the same thing. That's weird. I don't actually know what they are, but anyway, we can say interact is E maybe, and we say pause is escape, and inventory is I. Okay. So then, yeah, for crouch, we'll just say something like tab. I don't know. So there we go. This is where we store our data. If you want to implement this so that the user can edit it in the game, I'm not going to do that in this video, but the way you would do it is you would have some kind of panel with a list of the key binding options, so like jump, crouch, interact, and then on the other side all the key codes, or like a button that when you click it, it then awaits an input, and then you press the input like you know, U, and then it'll set it to U. The thing is, once you've done that, you then just need it to change this scriptable object, and then you're done. Though obviously, if you build the game, scriptable objects only stay changed when you change it in the inspector. So you would have to, when you close the game, or like when you've saved it, to write it to a save file and then load it back up when you load the game. So what we need to do now is we need to go write the code to use this. If I go to the game manager, it'll say, hey, we need to have some key binding, so let's just set this one as our current to use one. Then if we go to the key binding, the input manager, sorry, let's write these functions out. So the one that's going to return a key code from an action, we can say for each key bindings dot key binding check. So basically, yeah, for every of those like things in the list that we've made called key binding check, in key bindings dot key binding checks. So for everything in that list, if key binding check, so if the thing we're currently checking dot action, so key binding action, is equal to the one that's been passed in. So basically, if the action here, if the action there is equal to the action we've passed in this parameter, then we will return key binding check dot key code. And then if nothing happens, then we're going to return none. But that's just in case that doesn't work. But you know, it should work. So yeah, we can say, hey, we can pass in jump and we'll get out space. We can pass in interact, we'll get out key code E or whatever, I. So that works. Then we're gonna say get key down. So we want to say for each key binding blah 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 blah. what we can do is we can say, copy and paste that. So for everything in there, if the key binding action is equal to key, which we'll sort out in a second, return input dot get key down key binding check dot key code, and I'll explain that 1 second. So we want to take in an action, so key binding actions key. So what we're saying is we're going to say get key down jump. So basically we're going to call somewhere in our code input manager dot get key down and pass in jump. And what it's going to say is it's going to say, all right, we're going to check them all. If the jump key, if the one we've found in there is the right one, then we're going to return. That's the Unity built-in method that actually does read input. But instead of writing in here our custom input, we're going to read it from the scriptable object. So whatever the scriptable object's code is, we'll use that one instead. So it's kind of like overwriting it. And then now that we've done that, to finish off, all we need to do is just copy this through to the other two. So boom, boom, and just say get key up, and just make sure, yeah, we can pass in the key, because it needs to know which one it's checking. And that's it, to be honest. That's all we need for the writing the functions to check. Now all we really need to do is just do a quick test. So if we go back to the game, what we can do is we can have I don't know, a cube in the scene, and I'm going to write some really quick cube script. This is something really quick to test it. So let's say, all right, we're writing something new in our game and it needs to take input. Obviously we're going to use the custom input system. So maybe in the update for this cube, we'll say like if, and then we can say input manager. So if we use input manager dot get key, dot instance dot get key down, and it's going to take in a key binding thing. So if I put enter dot, it'll then give me a list. So if I say, yeah, I want to check when we do jump. So basically this is just like normally you'd put if input dot get key down, whatever the jump one is, this is the same. If our custom one dot get key down jump, then the actual input manager is going to handle what that means. So I'm going to say, yeah, if the jump key is pressed, then we will say transform.translate 0, 1, 0. Now, that's just going to move it up 1 in the Y. It's not going to fall back down or anything, but it's just a test. And also, just for the sake of being efficient, if we actually, rather than calling the input manager instance every single frame, and getting it, we can just say in the start method that input manager is equal to the input manager dot instance, just so that we can store it and it's just more efficient rather than calling that every frame. But anyway, there we go. So if I now press whatever key is jump, it's going to do that. And what we can do is we can test the key binding change as well. I could just change it in runtime and it'll work. So obviously you would have to change it for a menu, but I can for now just do it manually. So cube, you have the cube script on, so I'm going to press jump. I press spacebar. As soon as I press spacebar, it goes up. If I go to Keybindings and I say, actually jump isn't space now, it's I don't know, alpha 5, that means 5 on the keyboard. So if I press 5, now it goes up. If I press spacebar, let's just do that. Doesn't work. If I press 5, I need to actually be selecting it. So yeah, if I press spacebar, nothing. Press 5, it's actually changed it, and then boom, it's saved. So obviously, just be careful if you change scriptable objects in runtime. But if it's in the editor, it's fine. If you've built the game, then it won't change when you close out. So you have to save it properly. So it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. But yeah, jump we want to be space. Yeah. But anyway, I hope this video was helpful to you. I'd highly recommend using this if you don't currently have a solution for handling input in your game. If anyone actually has a better idea or way to do it, then feel free to say. But I'm pretty content with this. But I'm always looking for improvements and different ways to do things if people have better ideas. But yes, if you haven't already, obviously like, subscribe, it'd mean a lot. Join the Discord server, links in the description. But apart from that, thanks for watching and goodbye.